Mealybugs in general will be overwintering either as an adult or sometimes as, basically as adults anyway, under the bark. So if we actually do some monitoring for that, we can find when the crawlers, so we actually have a little crawler that you can see on the screen here, tiny little character. When that moves out from under the bark, moves onto the leaves, that's really your best time if you want to try and control them by spraying. The mealybugs themselves are these sort of woolly looking things, and they've also, depending on what species it is, they'll have a long tail as well. So you can pick that up quite easily with the hand lens, and that actually helps you decide what chemicals you might want to use to control it. There's a number of biological controls out there, so there's what we call the mealybug ladybird, which will get in and eat them, and it actually looks like a mealybug itself, so you've got to be careful that you can actually identify those. But there's also a whole range of other things that get into it, including some little parasitic wasps. Main predator for mealybug is a ladybird, if you like, called Cryptolemus montrusii. It's a bit of a mouthful, but Cryptolemus is what most people would know it by. You can buy that commercially. It's quite a large beetle in terms of the adult size compared to, say, Staphylococcus that you use for your two-spotted mite control. But the immature form of Cryptolemus looks very much like a mealybug. But it doesn't have the big long tail that these guys have got. So the main thing is to understand what it's doing, be able to identify the difference between Cryptolemus larva and the mealybug that you're trying to control. And then you can monitor for that just the same way that you do most of your normal monitoring, your leaf samples or whatever. These mealybugs tend to get into the calyx of the fruit very early, before the calyx is actually closed over. So you also need to be careful that you're actually monitoring in those areas, not just on the leaf itself. Now, obviously, with any biological control agent, it'll have different ranges of chemicals that it's susceptible to. So if you're going to use something like Cryptolemus, you need to check with the supplier to make sure that what chemicals you plan to use won't actually kill the predator once you've released it. The other thing with it is that once it's fed and developed into an adult, that will disperse. So it won't necessarily stay in your orchard forever. So you might have to keep buying some in to do the job. So one other issue to consider with the mealybug control is that if you are wanting to spray because you've got such a big problem with the mealybug, you need to be very careful that the chemicals that you then apply for your mealybug control don't actually have an adverse effect on other biological control agents that might be in the orchard. So for instance, the predatory mites that are used for controlling two-spotted mite or European red mite are susceptible to some of the chemicals that would be registered for mealybug control. So if you're timing your mealybug sprays at a time when the predators are active, then you may actually end up with a mite problem on top of or as a result of trying to control your mealybug problem. So you've got to weigh up which is the most important one for you. Is it the mealybugs or is it the mites? And you can't balance it all out by use of appropriate chemicals if you need to. At the moment, we don't have good action thresholds for mealybug control in the orchards. We're still working on that. The main thing is to stop, if you can, the mealybugs from entering the calyx of the fruit, so it's usually an early intervention. When you've got crawlers on the leaf is an important time to start looking at those interventions, because that's the period when they're most exposed either for pesticides or for the biological control agents. So we need to be able to get in early enough for that.